Welcome back, peeps, to Purrfect.dev, where we give you cats the freshest dose of dev snacks.
Now with your amazing hosts, Alex Patterson and Brittany Postma. This episode is sponsored by Builder.io. Visually build on your tech stack.
Welcome back, peeps, to Purrfect.dev. We have a great crew here today talking about Partytown and web workers and how it fits in with Next.js later on. And we have two special guests with us today. Do you guys mind introducing yourselves so I don't completely botch the intro? Houssein, do you mind going first?
Sure, yeah. My name is Houssein Intro. I am a software engineer in Google. I work on Google Chrome, and I work in a very small team called Aurora, where we try to improve the web framework and open source ecosystem by actually collaborating with framework authors and developers.
Nice. Thank you.
That's really cool.
And I'm Adam Bradley, Director of Technology at Builder.io, working on Qwik and Partytown, and formerly worked at Ionic and Stencil.js.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on again and talking all about Partytown. So Adam is kind of the initiator, if you will, of Partytown. How much of this thing did you actually write? Was it before you even joined Builder?
Well, the idea certainly was around for a while. That's bothered me because, I mean, the classic story is like you get your website to be 100 out of 100. You put a lot of effort into it. And then once the real world hits and all sorts of analytics and A/B testing and all sorts of scripts get added to it, your performance is destroyed. And so it's something that's always bothered me is like, again, like how much effort I put into something, making it fast, and then other things slow it down and there's no control of that. And so the idea has always been like, why can't we just put this stuff into a different thread? The stuff, because it really is a lot of like analytics is like asynchronous, meaning it doesn't need to be blocking. It doesn't need to slow your site. It really can be like, all right, an event fired, let's fire that off in a different thread and let it take its time, so that's the whole like kind of where the source of this happened.
So a lot of people out there are from our audience, at least, are front-end developers, and they often don't get into like the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of how a lot of this works. So I want to show kind of a blog that we're actually working on at Builder just to show off some of the pictures of kind of how Partytown's functioning. But I'd love to break down like what the heck is a web worker and how are we like getting this magic to start to occur. So let me pop that open real quick. So this is kind of an illustration Steve created that has both, and hopefully you guys can see that. Okay, let me bump it up a little more maybe. I guess that's as big as it's going. So on the left side here in the blue, it has kind of like the main thread of things, and that's your code that you write, whether it's in React or just JavaScript, whatever that piece is, that's your code that's going on. In the reddish color here, that's the third-party scripts going through. You'll notice in that funnel that like all of that has to happen at the same time. Can you guys maybe Houssein, this is for you coming out of the Chrome team, like why does that all process on one thread on JavaScript? How does that work?
Yeah, that's just the way JavaScript generally is, right? It's single-threaded. And when you think in the context of web pages, like even Adam mentioned, it becomes a big issue when you have your first-party code that's responsible for either hydrating your page or showing content on the page, actually competing with things that's coming from a separate origin that might not be as important, right? So I think the thing about using web workers for this kind of logic, a lot of people have worked on it before, but no one, in my knowledge, has done anything that actually allows you to use a worker, but also access browser APIs. And I think that's the big differentiator here. And when Partytown came in, it's like, wow, maybe this is now a possibility.
And there's a little bit of magic that had to occur there. Like I think people have used service workers and web workers, but there was always this assumption that kind of had to take off out of the main thread, and you couldn't talk with the UI. So why would I use this thing, right? Like I'm a front-end developer. This doesn't make sense. But on the right side of this picture, what we're kind of showing here is that it allows the main thread, your code, and the blue to go one path, and then like the rest of that third party, so Google Analytics, you name it, whatever third party thing you're loading up to run on a different thread. But the crazy part is often you have to like talk back to that item. So even though we split that off to a web worker, how does that actually break down, Adam, where we're able to say, okay, we've loaded this thing, but now I need to send events to it for like Google Analytics. How's that stuff
Sure.
going?
Yeah. And like web workers have been around for, over a decade. They've been you've been able to use them. And so it's not exactly a new idea. There's plenty of blog posts talking about how you should be running your CPU intensive tasks inside of a web worker. And there's lots of good cases of that. But the challenge has always been like something like Google Analytics is at some point it references document.cookie or document.title. And so imagine the code written for that. It's going to expect the blocking response immediately. It's not a callback. It's not a promise. There's no async await of document.cookie. It's like it's expecting it, in a synchronous callback after that. And so then when you put things into a web worker, there's always a synchronous moment in between communicating between the main thread and the web worker. And so that's always been the blocking thing here. It's like, I don't have control of everyone's third-party scripts. They're writing their code as if it's on the main thread. And because we don't have control of that, then basically you can't run the script inside of a web worker. So really the magic that, and I guess hack, trick, what you want to call it, what's really happening is that there is a cool thing that a web worker can do is that it can be blocking. You can tell it to stop for a moment, wait for this task to finish, and then continue. And that trick is import scripts or a synchronous XHR request, which is some people point out like that's deprecated inside of the main thread. And that's for good reason. Like you don't want your main thread to be able to be blocked by synchronous requests, just HTTP requests. But on the web worker, that's a huge part of how web workers work, especially import scripts. They want to be able to block and, let things run beyond that. So a lot of think of Code Sandbox or Stack Blitz or any sort of code that has a lot of stuff happening into a web worker, they want that blocking. And so that's a feature really of a web worker. So, really the question got going is like, all right, if I want to run Google Analytics inside of a web worker, at some point it's going to do, element.get attribute, set attribute, document.cookie, something is going to be blocking. And so when that happens, what's actually happening is that we're able to fire a synchronous XHR request so that we can tell the web workers like, just chill out. Let's get this information first, and then you can continue. And so in that synchronous XHR request, it talks to actually our service worker. The service worker is the layer that's able to translate this synchronous request into an asynchronous request. And so the service worker can then, and please stop me at any time because I can go on and on.
I was thinking like below this, I have them kind of broke down, and maybe we can just like get into them a little bit. Go through the rest, and then we'll kind of dive in.
So the service worker, which is actually just another web worker, is just a more restricted web worker. That's able to do the post message to the main thread. That's able to, all right, I'm looking for document.cookie. Let's get that value. It gets that value, goes back to the service worker. The service worker then responds to the XHR request with the data. And so you'll notice that like this isn't going to be any more efficient or any faster than if you just did document.cookie on the main thread. But that's not the point. Like the point is that your first party code, your React code, your Angular code, all that code needs to run as fast as possible because that's your app. That should have high priority on the main thread. All this other stuff needs to kind of be thrown into a different thread. And if it takes a millisecond longer than it should have, that's fine because it really is like third-party code that can be asynchronous.
Nice. Yeah. How the heck did you like put all this together? It just baffles me. Like, yes, all these things existed, but did you just really like hate a page score that you were getting and you're like, this has to improve somehow?
Yeah, there's a lot of like, for every one thing that you see working, there's about 1,000 things that didn't work. So there's a lot of stuff that did not work. And I will say like the service worker trick and the XHR, the synchronous XHR trick, I would like to see that as, today's trick, but really the future way that does work is atomics. And so atomics, you are able to tell a thread to just like chill out. Let me go get some information. When I get the information, let's continue. And so that's really, that API is exactly what we needed. The problem is that you can't really just enable it on the everyday website right now without other things breaking. And that's a whole nother, there's plenty of documentation of like why that is. So I would like to see, in the future, we can get more to using the atomics way, which is actually a smaller build It's 10 times faster, and it's built for it's doing exactly what we need it to use it for. So just wanted to point that out.
Is Atomics? I was trying to bring it up here. Yeah, the support for Atomics. It looks like it's in all the browsers. There's just some minor issues. It sounds like that are still being worked out.
Yeah, no, it's actually supported, and it was most of the browsers supported up until 2018 or 19, and then there was a security vulnerability. What was it called? Spectre.
Oh yeah, the big one. Okay.
And that one actually made the browsers all disable it, because I guess a timing attack's going to happen, things like that. And so then now they are all enabled again, but you need to have a certain HTTP header to enable it, which is great. All right, so just have that HTTP enable it. But then once you do that, then a lot of your like cross-origin requests are going to stop working. And so for your everyday e-commerce site, or pretty much every e-commerce site, that's going to break something. And so it's not something you can just flip the switch and it's going to magically work. You'd have to kind of start your website with Atomics and then adjust it as it goes. But like you couldn't go to Amazon.com homepage and turn on Atomics to expect everything to work.
Nice. We're gonna take a quick pause and do our advertisement. When we come back, I want to just show off some demos of like Partytown working and things like that. So we'll get into it.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Builder.io, visually building the web. Builder.io has one of the most powerful visual editors in the industry. Unlike other tools, Builder actually produces the code for you. You don't have to completely switch out your framework either. Just use one of the handy SDKs that are available. There's no limits to what you can build. Instead of limiting your marketing team, start to optimize and let them do the work. This will allow your web developers to get back to the hard work that it takes for other components, allowing your team to do A/B testing and personalization. Stop worrying about bugs in production. Just use the site as it is, then you can analyze and start converting all of your customers with Builder's built-in heat maps. Stop limiting your growth with developers' long lead times. Start building, optimizing, analyzing, and start growing faster. Don't take my word for it. You can sign up for free today and start building the web visually with Builder.io.
We have this whole new marketing thing. I'm gonna have to redo that whole advertisement soon. It's gonna be crazy.
Oh, it's such a good ad. I love it.
I know, like our whole UI has changed. Like it's getting a little dated. It's only been probably 3 months, 4 months. So good times. So the first thing I want to show off, we keep talking about like performance hits and Partytown can improve it. I really want to show like what this actually means first, and then we can dive into like how to actually implement it, I think. And at any point, stop me. You guys are the experts. I've just been messing around with it a little bit.
Yeah, and I just hit me that like I went deep fast, of how it works into that. But like we really haven't talked about kind of like the benefits of it.
Yeah, we're gonna rewind back into that a little bit, and then we'll kind of go back forward again. So this page, let me see if I can make that a little. There we go. So Builder.io has this page out here. It's at /c/performance, and we will put the link in the description as we get done here. This page actually, I took and ran Nike.com on it, and you can pick any site. I just picked this one because I was checking out shoes earlier. And what it has right here is the current score on the speed side of things. And when we break that down, we actually show like if you were to use Partytown, I don't know if this does Qwik. I can't remember, Adam. It's been a minute. I don't know if it does or not, but this is the kind of improvement you can start to get when you start pulling out third-party scripts. And so there's opportunities in here like Partytown that you can go out and check out and just see in there. Adam also built a tool, if I can find it. There we go. So you can find this tool on our Partytown docs, and it's under tests. And you can come out to this service benchmark. So I'm going to go ahead and do just like, here's Google Tag Manager standard. I think that's how you run this, right? So that's just Google Analytics, right?
Yeah, so that would be everything else is excluded except Google Tag Manager.
Okay, so we're just going to fire up Google Tag Manager and run page speed analytics.
So this is insights. Yeah, so this is as simple of a web page as possible. The only thing on it is Google Analytics. the standard way.
Houssein, are you part of the team that's building this as well?
I am
Like
not,
the page
but
insights?
we
Okay,
work really closely with them.
cool. So it looks like this ran awesome. So
And this is part of the problem is like if you have a simple web page that does nothing and you add Google Analytics, like there's no problem, like there's no performance issue at all. The issue is as you start to compile them all together, you know, so like I'm sure the Google engineers were able to make Google their tag manager as fast as possible. But when everybody is doing that and everybody is being added to the main thread, that's where the problem happens.
So I'm going to run another one with that in mind, kind of just adding all of the different third-party services that we have out here. It'll be fun to add some more on here. I keep forgetting we should add like YouTube and stuff like that. So now we're getting a score of 78, and this is probably pretty typical because we've kind of mashed on that main thread as all of those third-party scripts took off, and we're back to that funnel that has all those dots coming through it.
And remember, this is a web page that does nothing,
Yeah.
And you're already at 78. Like you haven't done any of your own code. Yeah,
that's a great point. And so then we dive in, and again, same page, doing nothing, but we only move. There we go. We only move all those scripts to Partytown to start, and that's it. And again, this is all just trying to highlight the fact of like what getting off the main thread looks like. So as you can see, our performance score went immediately back up to 100 because the main thread really has nothing to do.
Right.
It's got nothing loading. Versus 78, it's still the main thread didn't have a whole lot of work to do, but all these third-party scripts were jammed on it. So that's a different
6 listed there. I mean, that's even generous. I mean, if you think of a typical e-commerce site, you know, that makes, you know, and I'm not, you know, dogging everyone that puts, you know, analytics and stuff on there. There's a great business reasons to do that. You know, there's absolutely reasons to have analytics, you know, and quite a bit of them on your site. But yeah, like a practical one's going to, you know, have 20 some, and that's going to make a big dent into your performance, which then can make a big dent into conversion rates and things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we break that down with a new blog that's coming out soon, kind of conversion rates and what cost that will add up to and things like that. But even on Builder.io, like we are trying to use the best practices with Partytown and everything else, but we're still loading up Google Analytics, Amplify. What else do we have on there? We have HubSpot kind of floating around somewhere in there. And then we have...
I thought it was funny. Even the Partytown site has analytics added to it. Just like to make sure like someone, you know, it was added to it and like, oh yeah, I got to put this through Partytown.
Yeah, exactly. And then what's the little helper thing that people always use? You click the button and it kind of pops up. Somebody talks to you. What is it?
Intercom.
Intercom, I feel like just kills a site.
Yes.
So that's a really big one. That's really easy to send. Well, don't quote me on this.
Twitter embed blows my mind. That's like 3 megabytes for a tweet. I mean, it's,
oh my gosh.
And there's like 3 or 4 different iframes that get loaded, and yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, so simple things like that you think are just cool. And this, I feel like this drives back to like all those WordPress sites that get such a bad rap. It's because you're using all these third-party things that are loading stuff constantly. So
yeah.
I'm going to bring up...
That's a whole other topic. I won't go into it.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole. I'm going to also bring up just kind of how to get started with this. And Adam, you can kind of steer this if you want, and then we'll kind of get all the way to the next implementation of this, hopefully.
Yeah, like so here, the part that says script, the type text/Partytown. That's perfectly a standards way of basically saying like, don't run the JavaScript. You know, what we're saying is like if you have type Java, you know, text/JavaScript, then it knows, like the browser knows like I need to execute this immediately. Or if there's no type at all, that's the standards way of saying like this is just a script, execute it. Or type equals module, that's going to be the ESM way of running the JavaScript. In this case, we're basically making it a inert div. I mean, basically it's like it's an element with words inside of it, but the browser doesn't actually execute it. And that's kind of the big thing, is that this makes it easy for you to take your existing site that has a script tag added somehow, some way, and just add this type attribute to it to basically tell the main thread, here's the stuff that I wanted to run, but don't actually run it. And we'll let Partytown kick in and run it on the main thread. And so I think what was important is I didn't want to have like a Webpack loader or, rollup plugin, like have all this sort of build process into your application of how we want to disable the scripts, but rather basically however you're doing it today, just add this attribute to kind of disable it, whether you're using WordPress or Drupal. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be like a Node.js only thing.
So I think we kind of walked through each step, but I think it's kind of important to just clarify on this one, or on all of these. So when we talk about like running in the worker versus the main thread, can you just kind of talk through when we show something like this, whereas like window.location href, how is that actually functioning? Like if a third-party service is trying to access something like a window, how does that work?
Yeah, so one thing, so if you think of like JS DOM, in the Node.js community, it's like Node doesn't know about all the browser APIs. And so JS DOM was created to do that. And JS DOM is, at least a megabyte of JavaScript to try to replicate how the browser works. And so immediately you think like, well, we got to do the same thing. But then like once you have a megabyte of JavaScript, you've completely defeated the purpose of what you're trying to do. And so so instead, what's being built in the web worker is just a really fancy proxy of just like anytime you reference window.something, like let's go get it. Let's just like, oh, I don't know what window.location.href is. Like it just collects up like these are the words I want. Let's go over to the main thread and run the same thing over there and get its response. And so like the whole idea is that the worker thread doesn't really implement the DOM. It rather just like forwards things over to the real DOM to get the information. It just knows how to, basically make a good proxy.
It's almost like a request, an async request that waits on the
basically
return.
Yeah. Like and so in this case, like window.location, it's a getter. And so a getter needs to be blocking. And so then one trick that we also do is that any sort of setter or like set attribute, something like that actually doesn't need to be blocking. So we can queue them all up. And so like, let's say you have, add class list, style.color equals red. You do all sorts of set attributes. You can queue them all up. And then the moment you do a getter is when you kind of move them all and you batch it all in one go. And so that's one way that we kind of help the performance, because it can, like, especially for UI updates, like intercom is doing a lot of UI things. And so we want to be able to batch as many as possible so that there's, not really flickering happening. So that's one way that we do that, is that, setters we're able to batch up, and getter has to be like the synchronous call.
That totally makes sense. It's kind of hard to wrap your brain around it at first, but I like talking through it that way. It totally makes sense. It's amazing that you don't have to change any code that was already written to do this too. That's the part that really blows my mind.
Yeah, and that's the I think number one requirement, because if we could just call up Google Analytics and say like, hey, you guys should start doing things with async 08, then this wouldn't be needed at all, really, and we could run things. But the reality is there's millions of different services that will never be able to change their 500 kilobytes of code.
Yeah, totally. So I think we kind of broke down like how the synchronous XHR works. Yeah, so I think we have the gist of like all of the different points that we've worked through, even though like this is way more complicated. And please, folks, go out to partytown.builder.io, and it's got all the docs you could ever imagine. We're just trying to kind of highlight how this thing works, because talking through it, I feel like helps a lot, and it explains the story of like why Adam wrote this thing, and we've kind of pushed it forward so much. Houssein, I want to kind of pick on you for a little bit now. You started the RFC over on Next.js World. What prompted this to like kind of hit your brain as, oh, we could use this on a large package like Next.js?
Yeah. And just to give some context here, so we've been working with a lot of frameworks, including Next.js, just trying to improve a lot of what developers generally do, right? Like most people using frameworks like Next.js, they want to build their applications as fast as possible, but many are not too focused on trying to improve, performance characteristics of certain pages, certain routes. So I've been thinking of ways to do that and make the developer experience as easy as possible. Ralph, another engineer on our team, came up with the idea of a script component. And the idea is for developers that want to include third-party scripts into the Next.js application, what if there was a script API that they can import, very similar in the sense that they can have their source URL as a prop, but they can also now specify a bit easier where they want it to load. Do they want the script to load before the page becomes interactive, after the page becomes interactive, lazily during browser idle time? So think of it as script async defer, but essentially on steroids. And again, the developer wouldn't have to do too much. It should be very easy for them. So while we were doing that, we also had the idea of how nice could it be, and this is before I think Partytown even launched. How nice could it be if something like the script components could even offload scripts to a worker? And then while we were having a discussion, that's when I think the very first alpha version of Partytown dropped. And it was like sort
Good
of a
time.
light bulb moment. Yeah, definitely a great time. Because it did a lot that we were already thinking of, right? Like it did a lot of the ideas of how can we make synchronous and async operations work? How can we access browser APIs? So it felt sort of like a no-brainer to actually try and test it out. But we also wanted to, again, to make the process as seamless as possible, because technically Next.js developers can use Partytown on their own, right? They can install the library themselves. They can look into the docs and figure out how to actually use the right attributes. But we've also noticed that if we don't really give the developers the easiest tools to begin with, many are not even going to go through that step. So we've just very recently integrated Partytown in the script component, specified it as a new strategy. Right now, it's just called worker. And the idea is now if you do this for any script, it'll automatically do so. And if the developer actually tries using it for the very first time, there'll be a very nice console warning that says, hey, you don't have Builder.io Partytown installed. Maybe you should install it first. So just making that developer experience a lot better.
Sure.
So it's still
So
experimental.
was it was your RFC before Partytown, or was it?
It was actually right after Partytown came out. So I wrote the RFC after the. So I wrote it as a doc before Partytown dropped. But then once it actually dropped, I updated it. I was like, it makes more sense to just use Partytown right now. And then I posted it on GitHub as a discussion. Got a lot of good attention. I think a lot of developers in the community were like, this is super cool. I'd love to see if this is baked in as easy as possible. We also launched a developer survey around that same time. We worked with the Vercel folks just to ask Next.js developers what they want to see. And one of the biggest feedback points we saw with regards to scripts were we would love to see Partytown integrated a lot easier, which was kind of like some super cool ammunition to prove that we can work on this. So then that's when the RFC and GitHub actually mentioned Partytown as a potential solution. And then I worked on landing it as experimental feature.
Nice. Oh, that is really good timing. So just kind of taking a look, I brought it back up here. When we look at how to introduce this into a Next.js page, it's still experimental. Want to say that right off the top, beta, whatever you want to call it. So you actually have to flip this flag on. So in your next.config.js, you actually have to turn this on. Past that, I mean, is there a lot different than you would normally do with Partytown from a script experience? Like,
No,
I know
it's pretty.
Next usually gets involved and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's the thing is it's pretty straightforward from this point on, right? Like if they have that flag enabled and they try to run a build or start a server, they'll see a message that says, hey, you have this flag enabled, but you need to install Partytown. But outside of that, it's pretty straightforward, right? They just need to specify strategy as worker. And the thing is, the way the script component works now is developers can use this component anywhere in their application. So in a Next.js app, this could be in a component, this could be in a document file, this could be in the head component, right? And the reason why we did this was before this, I think a lot of developers were kind of unsure where to place script tags.
Yeah.
So with a web page, it may be pretty straightforward, but in a page with so many, like an application with so many components and files, it's a little trickier.
So it doesn't have to go in a route.
That is correct. It can go anywhere.
I feel like I often get a like lint warning not to put the script tag into the head or something like that. I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So that's good to know.
Yeah.
I do like the capability where like you don't have to load this globally too. And I think sometimes that's where WordPress kind of gets in trouble because they load all this stuff on every single page. Whereas this, you can really pick like the component, the page you're working on in Next.js and just load that one thing on it, which is awesome.
Exactly.
Cool. No, that totally makes sense. Looping it all in. I did want to bring up too, just for people who don't know, like this is the Aurora project and the Aurora team. And basically your whole job is to make frameworks and the web better, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I can also give some background on here. There's a lot of teams in Google, right, that improve the browser, they improve core browser APIs. They work with, different platforms on, let's say WordPress or frameworks. But previously, before Aurora actually kicked off, I was very closely tied with the developer relations team, and we would spend a lot of time telling developers what to do, right? Like, hey, you should be placing scripts in here and there. You should be optimizing your images. You should be lazy loading them and so forth. And we still do that. I think that's a very important thing. We have to continually tell developers the best way to build their sites, and tools like PageSpeed Insights and Lighthouse help. But when the Aurora team was kicking off, we were like, since so many developers rely on frameworks, we're talking about essentially millions of web developers around the world, billions of page loads are on sites that use frameworks. What if these frameworks could actually be optimized to a point where developers don't have to do the work, right? In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to tell developers what to do if the tools that they're using already does automatically. So that was kind of like the gist that kind of kicked off. And then we had a lot of ideas kicking off early on. They were like, should we build our own framework? Should we open source a Google framework, right? And it was very just high level ideas to begin with. And then we, stalled Next.js. We wanted to really tie in with the React community, and it felt like a natural fit to start collaborating with the Next.js team.
Very cool. So I'm gonna ask you both a very loaded question, and we'll see. This one's out of left field, but do you ever see Partytown become like whatever branding you put on that, but becoming part of the browser in the future? Like we don't have to think about this anymore. What do you think?
You want me to go first, or Adam, you want to go?
You can go first.
Sure, I can give my take. I think the thing about tools like Partytown is, definitely a lot of research and a lot of experimentation needs to be done to the point where we can confidently say for like a large percentage of third parties, it's actually a useful thing and it's not breaking the capabilities, right? And it's hard to say that because when a tool is experimental, there's always going to be, some cases where a third party isn't loading when it should. So one thing that I could see and I hope so, would be some learnings within Partytown would sort of fall back, right? Like if we're talking about the script tag as a browser API or a certain attribute to it, it would be super cool to see, oh, wow, the stuff that happened in Partytown worked so well. We can bring that to the browser team and say, can we have some of these technologies baked into, atomics or the script tag or something like that? So I wouldn't say the whole library, but at least small pieces of it could be a very positive thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that there's quite a bit of code inside of Partytown that needs to make up for stuff that would be nice to have. The biggest one is, and then what else can I say? Like the browser now has the capabilities of what we need. It can do two things. It can do web workers, it can do atomics. It has a lot of the constructors that we need that are in the web worker, and even things like fetch and a lot of the APIs are over on the web worker, and so we can reuse a lot of that stuff. What it doesn't have is the DOM. But being that we have atomics at the lowest level of the browser now, and really a lot of the constructors could be there. So you think about like a DOM token list. There's a handful of node lists. There's a bunch of like kind of constructors that are like DOM centric, but you can't really construct them in the web worker. So I guess what I'm saying is like a lot of that stuff the core browser has. So if this could help Partytown help say like, actually, if we could, have this constructor on the web worker, if we could, have like create a document inside of the web worker, that would make a big difference. Because even you can do document.implementation create HTML document, right? If we could do that very same thing in the web worker, full well knowing that it's actually not going to be the real DOM. But if I could have all those constructors, there'd be a large amount of code that wouldn't be needed, and it would actually be much faster for Partytown operate. So yeah, I would hope that this can help spark some ideas in kind of the browser standard community of like, actually let's provide this, and then we could make this library even simpler or faster. And then other ideas can come from, whatever the successor to Partytown would be.
How do we get on a committee and like start making this happen?
I have no idea. I know it'd be a multiple year discussion.
Oh yeah, and getting it in multiple browsers.
Yes, so it's not happening tomorrow, but I would love to see it. Hopefully this sparks some ideas.
Clarification on the browsers. Is this working across all major browsers and mobile at this point?
Yes. And so basically it's anything that supports service workers. And then we know that you don't support service workers. So in that case, it basically undoes all the scripts. So if you're on IE 11, IE11 code's going to run. It's like, oh, I don't know what a service worker is. So then in our code, we then like, okay, find all the text/Pythons and turn them back into normal scripts. And so then they just basically run it how they should have ran.
Nice. Cool. So Safari, we're okay on? They're not behind on this one?
Nope. Safari's got everything that it's just service workers that we needed.
Perfect. Cool. What am I missing? I feel like we've run through my entire list of Partytown, how to implement it, how it got involved in Next.js, and how that experiment's going. Is there anything else? Brittany already has got something.
Yeah. I just want to know what other frameworks it works in
here's
and
the
how
svelte
we can,
question.
like the SDK. Of course, like I'm going to jump on the svelte train. But yeah, I want to see how it works in other frameworks, not even just Next.js. Like, does it work in Remix and Solid and all these other 100 frameworks we have?
And so on the website, Alex, if you can bring it up, like we've got a kind of a list of the integrations, but they're really just like helpful docs of like how to set them up in yours. Because again, at the lowest level, Partytown is really just a script tag. It's a script element with a type attribute. Any framework can make that. Any, Drupal, WordPress, you name it, can do that. And so these are just like how to enable it in your framework. So if your framework of choice, Svelte isn't listed here, really just comes down to submitting a PR of just like, this is how you would set it up in SvelteKit. This is where you put the file. This is the npm install you need to do. So yeah, if you were to click like, let's say Remix, it kind of just says like, this is a common Remix component or page. This is how you would set it up.
Yeah, awesome.
I think that means you need to put a PR in, Brittany.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick your brain at how to.
I put a PR to her in for our docs, so I can help you out.
Sweet.
Yeah, and this the website itself is Astro. So the Astro team has been awesome to work with too. They actually provided a plugin with their setup.
Astro is super intriguing to me just because it offers you the flexibility of doing all the different frameworks. I like it.
Yeah, it's really innovative stuff. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very neat.
I'm surprised you didn't use Qwik.
Well, we're still building it. That's it. So the Qwik site, the Qwik doc site, that is using Qwik. And really what we're doing right now is working on the REPL and the playground. And so like we're ironing out a lot of the bugs. And then like, the Builder.io homepage is using Qwik. And so, for the Partytown site, I wanted to use one that was done and working.
Yeah.
And then the Qwik site is pretty much the experimental site that we're working on.
You kind of brought up a good point there. Builder.io is using Partytown and Qwik on its main front page. Is there any other major people that you know of using Partytown live?
I know atoms.com, atoms.com is using it. And there's been a handful. Was it the Next Web, I think, is using it. I should probably put together a list. I know there's some fairly large websites that are using it. And with the caveat that it is experimental and really do baby steps. If you're going to use it, like don't just like enable it on a Friday afternoon and then have marketing call you on Monday that we're $5 analytics, because it is doing a lot of backflips to make this stuff work. So I would
deploys on Fridays.
Yeah, always deploy on Fridays. I would definitely say baby steps if you're going to start testing it out.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, well, we are going to jump into our Purrfect Picks now. I know you guys didn't have any listed, but if you think of any like composite decking, feel free to
I
throw
have 2
those.
extra ones that I'm gonna give to them for
My
yeah, I put 2 sorry, throwing that in.
I'm going to start with your first ones, and we'll see how far we get here.
Yeah.
Here we go.
So Synergy is my first pick, and it allows you to go from a server computer to a client computer. And I have my Windows PC hooked up as the server, and then I can have my MacBook on my other monitor and the MacBook itself. And my mouse will just go continuously. Once it gets to the edge of the windows, it flips and goes straight to the Mac. And it is incredibly, like, there's no latency. It's so nice and smooth. Much better than using like a KVM switch or something to have to do that.
This is cool. I'm literally working. Next to me, I have a Mac that's dual booted with Windows because I'm doing testing on Windows, and it's so
That's
annoying to go back and forth.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Your next pick.
Oh, my next pick is building with Next.js. Since we were talking a little bit about Next.js today, these are 2 of my favorite people to listen to, Cassidy Williams and Salma Elam Naylor. I really hope I got that right. But they did a talk. This is maybe a little outdated now. It was last year, but they're just amazing to listen to. So
I guess I'm going to have to open your next 2. I think we might have someone on one of these.
Yeah,
Ooh.
Exactly.
I don't know if I can open your next one, but talk about this one.
Okay, so this one is DevTools FM podcast with Steve Sewell from Builder.io, and they get into Partytown, Qwik, mitosis, they get into all the things. So it was a really good listen, and they bring up some interesting questions for Steve.
I know you have another one, but it keeps wanting to open podcast on my Mac. So
okay.
Adam, Modern Web Podcast.
It's Adam, who we have here with us today, talking about Partytown on Modern Web Podcast. And maybe I can get the link and put it in the chat for everyone.
Maybe this will work.
Yeah, that's it.
Cool.
Yep.
I didn't open that one. Perfect.
I have a question too, just so you know.
Oh yeah, let's definitely get that. Let me do these next 2, and we can pop that up. Let's see here. What were my 2? I've already forgot. Live share. Okay, so we did some live coding last night with showing off Next.js, Supabase, and then we brought that into use Builder.io, and I blew John's mind. So it's kind of fun. I'm gonna make an exploding head for John from Supabase. Once we started using components in Builder.io from Supabase, it all kind of merged together in one glorious moment, and he went, ah! It was super fun to be able to collaborate back and forth. And he's trying to tell me, well, look here, he could highlight with this cursor on his end. He's in Australia, folks. So there wasn't any lag, which was nice. Going back and forth. So super cool.
That's crazy how that works.
Yeah, it's wild. The second one, it's a very unknown one. I might get yelled at. I don't know, Adam. You can tell me otherwise, but Steve put this together for us, and it's this little perf tool. So it's at perf.builder.io. It's awesome to like check out if you think something might be faster in JavaScript than something else. You can add all of the cases in that you want to check, and then run the tests, and it gives you those different cases back. So it was a GitHub that was thrown out there by Luke Jackson, and we kind of repurposed it to check different things that we like performance-wise.
Like a JS perf, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, JS perf I always have challenges with because it seems like it's down a lot.
Yeah, it does seem off. So yeah, you said we had one more question. Is that correct? Here we go. Oh. Full story. Have we tried it with full story? I don't know. Partytown and full story?
We haven't tried it. And so really that comes down to adding an integration test like with full story. And there's more than likely there's something that it's using that might get tripped up. And so usually submitting a PR of saying like, really submit a PR of that test, and with the failing test, we can then like try to debug like where did it get tripped up on. But really the idea is with Partytown is that we're not hard coding to one service, but rather we just want to make sure all the APIs work. So hopefully it just works. But that's where it's like, we don't know. We haven't tried every service, so try it out.
Is there a place to file issues?
Yep. So you want to shut off? Alex?
Yeah, I was gonna tell you 2 spots too. On our Discord is probably the best place if you want like immediate
Support.
reaction. But if you already know you have a problem, the best spot is going to be on our GitHub issues page. So out here is going to be the best part. We just had an internal discussion I'll talk about for a minute on how to try to get people in here and kind of going with our community and building that out. So like take and run with this stuff for sure. Like we're not like the overseers or the gatekeepers of Partytown. It's an open source project. So definitely what you see in here, if you want to become more involved and be a moderator, like just let us know. Like we're open to all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I can't stress that enough. Like we'd love to get more help with it, more scenarios. Basically, we can show you, happy to jump on calls if someone wants to really contribute to help out there. We have had a lot of talks with some larger companies that are going to be helping out a little bit more too. So please ping us on Discord and definitely, help us out on GitHub.
Yeah.
It helps everybody out.
We'll have some fun things coming soon. We'll let you know. All right. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you joining us for Purrfect Dev and talking all about Partytown. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Later.
Take care.
Yeah.